welcome Dr. Un Sang Tan from Singapore to come this distance to be with us today. You know, and I'm sure you know this, but Singapore is often looked at in America, in the United States, across the world, as a success story educationally. We know that everything isn't perfect, but education leaders often look to Singapore as an example of how education and investment can lead to good outcomes for students, for your economy. Dr. Un Seng Tan is the director of the Singapore Center for Character and Citizenship Education. And his leadership has helped position Singapore as a country that successfully integrates academic rigor, for which it's known, with many of the moral and character and soft skill development that we know is also very important for success. Are we joined by Governor Gordon as well virtually? Do we know? Okay, we think Governor Gordon from Wyoming is joining. But research shows that soft skills, and I want to see how you define those, of course, but we often think of things like grit, perseverance, responsibility, collaboration, are very important to career success. Companies tell us that, employers tell us that. But sometimes it's hard to get buy-in to integrate them into instruction, or we have a hard time measuring the outcomes as easily as we do in the core academic areas. We hope to learn from Singapore's success in making investments in character and citizenship education as a core strategy for global readiness. And with that, I would like to welcome Dr. Un Seng Tan, and if you'd like to speak for a few minutes, and then we can have a conversation.
Thank you very much, Governor Polis, and the very distinguished delegates. It's my honor and privilege to be here. Singapore is a very small city-state. Just to describe to you, we have only 350 schools for K to 12, 500,000 students, 35,000 teachers. So that's how small Singapore is. I started my career as a teacher and then went on to become the deputy headmaster of a school. I then went on to join a brand new polytechnic that was set up. Polytechnic in Singapore is like a community college. And then I went on to join the Teachers Training College, which is the National Institute of Education. Because Singapore is so small, we have only one national institution for the preparation of all teachers and school leaders. So you can see the convenience and the coordination of the system. When I was the Dean of the Teacher Education, I played quite a key part in trying to boost the image of the teachers. And basically, what I introduced was what I call the values-driven teacher education model. So basically, at that time, many people were occupied with skills, knowledge, but my perspective was that before you can talk about skills and knowledge, I think the most important thing is about the values. And one of the things that I constantly champion is the image and the identity of the teacher. And the idea is that we want to make sure that teacher is a profession. And drawing from the ideas of the medical profession and the legal profession, I think in the medical profession, we all know that the doctor has a clear vision and a mission. Anyone that comes to you in an emergency, you save life, do no harm. For a lawyer, very clear, we give voice, right, to my client, whoever he is. What about the teacher? So the idea was that the teacher as a profession is the champion of the learner. The teacher has to be somebody who is a very strong professional, who understands the learner and believe that every child can learn and achieve. So I came up with this idea that there are three underpinning values of the teaching profession in Singapore, which is that the number one value is that the teacher is the champion and the voice of the learner. And that is why we need to equip teachers with the best understanding of how people learn best. Number two, we address the idea of the teacher identity and the symbolism of the teacher. And the idea that I shared was that you and I, parent, everybody, at one time or another, we are teachers because you have to teach your own child, right? teaching is not something that belongs only to the teaching fraternity. So why do we not keep this teacher's image in a very strong way? And also because Singapore is within the Asian culture, you know that in China you have Lao Shi, in Japanese you have the sensei, in Indians you have the guru, and even in the Malay community they have the prophet teacher, you know. And even in Western culture you have, you know, Socrates, Plato, you know, the idea of a teacher. And so the idea was that the teacher equates to learning. And therefore, it is to the advantage of the society to always value the image of the teacher because it symbolizes learning and the preservation of tradition. So the second value was that teachers, you are representative of a very important symbol of learning. And we use these to identify the teacher identity. So you have the learner, the teacher, and then number three, the community, which is the teacher and the community. And the idea was that teachers don't work alone. We work in the community. The greatest problems of learning in school are not problems of learning. They are problems of family, society that bring a lot of the problems to the school. So teachers need to work with community. And the community need to respect and work with teachers. So this is the three basic value: the learner, the teacher, and the community. So based on these values, which I call it the DNA of the teacher, then we build the skills and the knowledge of a teacher. And the idea was to advocate that in order to have a good educational system, the most important digit is the teacher. We also have a history to this in relation to the founding of the nation. Singapore, as you know, when we first gained independence, we emerged out of a situation of very serious racial riots. I first entered primary school, elementary school in 1965. And the first thing I learned in school was when the alarm rings, how to hide under the table and not get hurt when the riots start, you know. And that was a kind of a situation. And in 1966, I wrote a book called, I have a book called Lee Kuan Yew and Education. And in the book I wrote and shared a story that in 1966, not long after we became independent, Lee Kuan Yew, who was then the founding prime minister, gathered a group of school leaders and teachers, and he spoke to them and said, I come to you not as prime minister to teachers, but as fellow citizens. I'm asking you this question: can we build this nation together? And whether the society succeeds or not, whether we can have a harmonious society, totally depend on you, the teachers. And it was on this basis that education was established. It was for nation building. It was for equipping students so that they can create value. It was for values preservation. So herein lies the importance of the teacher factor in the whole educational system. So if you look from a lot of data, whether it's a McKinsey report or a lot of the PISA tests, they would have also indicate that one of the critical success factors in Singapore is actually the teacher factor. And if you really just look at this whole symbolism and what we do with teachers, actually it is not so expensive because although we pay teachers well, teachers are among the best paid among the civil servants, right? But I mean, they are not paid like lawyers or doctors.
About how much would you say teachers get paid?
So teachers get paid close to the pay of the typical engineer. Yeah, in the case of Singapore, right? So now the next thing that we did was to make sure that when people enter into the teaching profession, there is a career vision. That means there is a vision of the path of how teachers grow. And we all know that education has become a very sophisticated science. And I would say that education is rocket science because how do a teacher get responsive to the world that's happening today and be able to translate that to their students? You know, it's highly critical. And the idea is that if you have a qualified thinking teacher, the teacher is the curriculum. I repeat again, the teacher is the curriculum. People often ask me about the Singapore curriculum, the math curriculum, the science curriculum. Actually, if you ask ChatGPT, you have the best curriculum today. It's not difficult to implement a beautiful curriculum and roll out all the packages. But the key to the curriculum is the teacher. So one of the things that I'm currently preoccupied with is actually to share, even within the Singapore system, that the curriculum today goes beyond all the learning outcomes and things like that. Because of the way the world is changing, the curriculum is very much now the whole process of learning, number one. Number two, the ecology of learning. And so that shifts the role of the teacher to become a designer of the learning environment. And this is one of the things that we are highly preoccupied with, how to change the paradigm of preparing our teachers as designers of the learning environment. And very importantly, pertaining to the aims of education, to shift the educational aims towards a more holistic learner. So when we talk about values, character, and citizenship, it is not just about the performative values. You mentioned about the soft skills, right? Grit, resilience, problem solving. But very importantly, there's another aspect of what is really human, the moral virtue aspect of the human. And I think this is especially important today with generative AI. I think I was sharing with some of your other delegates that I view the Gen AI as a quantum leap. I think just as energy changed the landscape of industrialization in 1900, generative AI is going to change the whole landscape of how we operate. So there will never be enough time for us to just use programs or write new curriculum. You depend so much on the teachers. So the other factor I want to share is that teachers in Singapore has a very high amount of professional learning. It is actually constituted into the career development of a teacher. Every teacher have 100 hours of professional development each year. And when we instituted the professional development hours, it was not just about saying that now you have so many hours to learn, because it translated into the fact that you need to send more manpower into the teaching force, because then the teachers can be released for learning. So I think I'll pause at this point, and then you can ask me more questions.
When you think in Singapore about what the goal of your education system is, how do you know, how do you align kind of what you want to produce, and how do you determine whether you're effective?
Yeah, so two simple factors, we always call it the two C's. First, character, which is the goal of education is produce a independent, autonomous, good person. Number two, the second C, competence. Having that competence to be able to climb any learning curve. So that's the way we look at it. But we are shifting more to a more holistic education, because you know that traditional educational system, and also within Asia, there's a lot of preoccupation with grades. So it's very important to shift away to look at education from a much broader way. And the way we look at it is how are our students experiencing learning, right? And we look at it from the several dimensions. I think number one is purposefulness. That people must always have the sense of hope and purposefulness. It's no use telling students that, we do not know the future, jobs haven't been invented, we don't know what is the economy, because it sends very negative message to them, right? So the way is always to give them that sense of hope, because hopelessness is the sure formula to any kind of deterioration, whether individually or as a society. So the idea is to build in them that sense of the personal agency, right? So purposefulness, very important. We make sure that safety, psychological well-being, these are all very basic. Multiple pathways for intellectual development and work fulfillment. And very importantly, incorporated in the curriculum, lessons on character and citizenship to strengthen social emotional learning, because I think the emotional growth is very, very important, and relationship building. So these are things that we do, and we felt that we need even a stronger agenda. So about 3 years ago, the Minister of Education and myself, we said that we need a center. In Singapore, when we want to invest in something or pay attention to something, we set up sentence. So sentence, because that's where you get funding, right? Because when you want to have supercomputer permeate the universities, you set up a supercomputer center. When life science became important, we have a center for genetics and so on. And the idea is that you get a center, and you get people who eat, sleep day and night, dream about it, and make sure that this thing is rallied through the whole community. So 3 years ago, we said, that, no, we need a center for character and citizenship education. And to show the importance of it, we actually say it will be, I actually asked for it to be a national center, and that's why we say Singapore Center. Why? Because, when we had the Life Science Center, after about 10 years or so, genetics and everything became so well established. Well, they closed down the center, but you put a Singapore Center, it will never close down, So, so anyway, the idea was that the center, I have my staff, 50% doing research pertaining to how best can we do pedagogies pertaining to character and citizenship, and the other 50% professional development. So the idea was to translate all the meta research very quickly into professional development, and basically every teacher from the pre-service to the in-service have to go through mandated modules pertaining to the character and citizenship. Why? There are many important trends pointing to this. The most obvious, of course, is social media. Social media has changed the world, the profile of our learners, right? They have a world of their own. So what is their world like? How do we reach out to them? So I think understanding the whole psychology and profile of the learners is also important. And also because the fact that with even your young kids, even your preschool kids are actually growing up in the social media world, and it impact on the whole developmental curve of the humankind. And so it's very important for us to understand that the social media impact. Secondly, I think we have to admit the fact that the world has become so much more polarized. We have a much more connected world, but also a much more fragmented world. So it is very important for them to truly understand, right? What are all these perspectives that is happening? Okay, so these are some very important driving trends, and also very importantly, I mentioned about being human, which is basically building the identity. So I think it's not uncommon in today's society that parents give kids iPad, and when do you give the kids an iPad, and you see even very young kids, even in preschool, swiping the iPad and things like that. And you look at even when parents meet with kids in the shopping centers or in a restaurant, are they looking at kids in the eyes? Imagine this, bringing up a child. How does a human gain basic identity as a child? They need another human being to look at you in the eye and talk. And that's how a child realized that, yeah, that's my identity. There's another human talking to me. First an inter, then an intra, right? So the fact is that we want to bring home the message that between 0 to 6 in the foundational years, the human interaction is so important to build the identity. We are talking about a lot of ADHD kids in the world today and things like that. Imagine how would a child now pay attention, look at the teachers, when from young they are just interacting with a two-dimensional piece of equipment. So there's a lot of implications about the human nature and the human development and understanding the predispositions of learning. So our advocation, we invest now very heavily. If you ask me what is the latest kind of investment in the education, is in the early childhood years, because it is in these areas where you lay all the predisposition, the foundation of learning. Then when we come to the 0 to 6, we call it laying the fundamentals of reading and literacy. So actually in the preschool years, we don't spend too much on content, because actually we don't worry too much about the competence. We worry about the fueling of competence. So I can share more about some other things.
I was just saying, how long, when do kids enter school? How many hours a week are they in school when they're 3 or 4 or 5? Maybe talk a little bit more about that early childhood piece.
Yeah, so kids are in schools, they are probably there from 7:30 to about 3. Yeah, so these are typical school days. Yeah, but within this school, although it's not just about the academic curriculum, very, very important as what we call the core curriculum, which is learning outside the classroom. And this is becoming more and more important. You know, actually, kids want to learn the real world. I mean, I just give you a little story. The elementary one school teacher went to a group of kids, and she wanted to know their standard of arithmetic, and she asked them a simple question. If you have if I have 3 apples in one hand and 4 apples in the other hand, what do I have? A young kid put out a hand and said that you must have very large hands. So actually, we think in abstraction, but kids always think in reality. So one of the moral of the lesson that we in our professional development is to tell our teachers, for goodness sake, bring the real world to the kids, you know. And designing lessons in real world learning. Yesterday you talked a lot about internship, workplace, and so on. So we also spend a lot of time helping teachers to design learning and also working with the community such that learning can be real, bringing the real world to them. And you see it some of my publication, I talk a lot about problem-based learning, which is learning in a thematic sense, not in a way, in an isolated way. So these are some of the things that we are doing.
Good. And before I open it up to everybody, let me ask, you have here education leaders from across the U.S. What are the most important lessons you think that we could learn here in the United States from Singapore's approach to whole child development? And also, how do we, politics exists everywhere. How do you get around the political difficulties around discussing the values to achieve what you've achieved? We have a very divided country here, and what advice would you have for us on that?
Yeah, so I always say, please take care of your teachers. I think the United States can do more to take care of their teachers. We always champion the teacher factor. They are not perfect, and sometimes what you see is what you get. But why don't we make it positive? Why don't we give them the development? Because everybody wants to do something fulfilling, right? So we believe in the teachers. So I think a strong factor of believing in the teachers. We give a lot of recognition to teachers, and it's not expensive to. For example, my institution instituted, we got a very simple sponsor from ExxonMobil to give a Caring Teacher Award. It's so inexpensive, but it's not about that award. But because when we said we have a Caring Teacher Award and we asked the parents, the students to nominate, we get lots of nomination of good stories, So I think we need to have that positive image of the teacher to help them function. And of course, I think that there is always possibility of investment into the career vision of the teachers. Now, pertaining to soft skills, I think in Singapore, we take a very eclectic approach, which is that the values that we emphasize are universal. I mean, Singapore is Singapore simply because we have a strong integrity factor. So in the character education, then there are 4 very important pillars that we emphasize. Number 1, respect. Respect of diversity, respect of race, language, gender, everything. Respect, very, very important, respect. Number 2, integrity. Number 3, care. Number 4, harmony, and something that we emphasize a lot. So we call it the rich value, RICH, respect, integrity, care, harmony. Every teacher knows that. So the reason we use simple language is that so that we can get a message through and to make it very permeating. So I think if we emphasize on the proper human virtues and values, it's very. I don't think there are any political nuances in that. In relation to that, of course, under each of these, I talk about pedagogy, right? The research of pedagogy. So, for example, I can tell you, recent times, Singapore has a big population of Malays. So when the Gaza war happened, I think issues of Gaza war, Palestinian, and all that stirs up everybody, right? So naturally, we do face these problems in the classroom too, right? Students ask and things like that. And so that's why we need to get into how do we deal with controversial issues. And the 2 things that we emphasize is, number 1, the whole pedagogy of listening. Listening. Number 2, the pedagogy of learning. Can we have a learning conversation instead of an adversarial conversation? So a lot of these things come into the fore, And we equip teachers with this so that these are things that will really help. And whether whichever political affiliation or things like, yeah, of course, we will have very diverse views, but can we sit down together and how do we create this conversation? And I think the place to learn this starts in the school, in their community groups, in their interest groups, in whatever groups. And again, there I say, the teacher played then a very critical role.
Out of the previous National Governors Association initiative, Disagree Better, actually came some coursework at the higher education level along the lines you've talked about. Colorado State University, and I think now several universities are offering Disagree Better work about how to deal with conflict successfully. Let's go to our members to continue the conversation. Don't be shy. Yes, please, Maria.
Thank you. I am extremely inspired by all the things that you're saying. I feel like you're just envisioning like just a model school for all kids. But talk to me a little bit about what the relationship between parents or guardians to the school in Singapore. I think that right now I don't know about other states, but North Dakota's kind of experiencing a little bit of some tension there. And while as a parent, yes, I do think that I know my child very well, I need to respect what the teacher does in the classroom, and there needs to be a little bit of a line. Talk a little bit about how Singapore builds that relationship and kind of how that works between the family and the school, please.
Yeah, very good question. So parents play an increasingly important role. I think Asian parents are crazy about grades of their kids. Number one. Number two, Asian parents love to compare what their kids are doing. So that is a challenge because, for example, they want teachers to be on their WhatsApp social media group. They want teachers to report what their kids are doing and things like that. So that's where you need to draw the line. And both the governance and the universities and teacher education, we have to actively advocate to parents, that teachers are professionals. Please respect what they are doing, and we send very strong signal to that. Yeah. So the governance often tell parents off.
Thank you. I think I'm right that one of the reasons Singapore does so well is because there's less variation. The average is really good, whereas obviously in the US there's a lot of variation between high-performing schools and lower-performing schools. And I think that that's partly because of Singapore's policy of integrated neighborhoods and schools. So by law, Singapore neighborhoods have to reflect the racial and ethnic composition of Singapore as a whole. And so I think that means the schools are like that too. And this is part of the harmony point. It's part of the history of Singapore to worry a lot about that. And so I just wonder, A, am I right in thinking part of your success is because your schools are highly integrated, both racially, ethnically, and economically, and whether there are kind of potential lessons there that we could take away from that in terms of mixing our own schools?
Yes, Richard, you are absolutely right. So we make it a very clear point that there would be no social congregation that breaks away from the national demographics. So, for example, we wouldn't want an Indian community that that do not then integrate with the rest and so on. So there's you're right. The social mixing not only happen in the schools, including housing. You must know that more than 85% of Singaporeans stay in public housing. So even in the case of the social housing, for example, let's say if you are selling a house and I want to sell a house to a Malay person or somebody else, I got to make sure that it doesn't disrupt the racial mix that was originally there. So this is how we make sure that there is this the social so-called integration. But more positively, actually, as I mentioned, we started as a country that was facing racial riots and things like that. And we went through a long process where we actually build a very harmonious society. So there's a very strong multiculturalism and truly appreciation and a joy of appreciation of the diverse cultures. We actually have, for example, official racial harmony day. And in that day, parents, they all go to the school with the children, and you see the Chinese student wearing Indian costume, the Malay student doing a Chinese dance, and so on. So that's the kind of celebrating diversity that we advocate in a very, very intentional way.
Yes, Gary.
Thank you for being with us. Can I ask, you talked earlier about what you believe is will be the transformative power of artificial intelligence in teaching and learning. Could you talk a little bit more about what you think will be transformative in Singapore and how it will impact the teaching profession specifically?
Yeah, so this is something that is very is emerging and is a work in progress. But like I say, we believe that Gen AI is going to be so pervasive. It's already, we use that a lot in Singapore, in the healthcare, in our logistic ports. I think if we are building another airport which is going to be bigger than all our current airport put together. We are building a megaport, and it's going to be a full AI type thing. We invest very heavily and truly believe in the fact that technology shift powers, technology shift, the human curve. And so we don't discourage the use of Gen AI. We want our students to use Gen AI as much as they can. But then you don't want a situation, of course, where the teacher used Gen AI to set his question and therefore doesn't need to think. And then the student used Gen AI to answer the question and also don't need to think, right? So, so the question is, the challenge to our teachers is how do you now set assessment using generative AI and think and design and be able to assess students and really make them think and design. So it goes back to my point about redesigning learning and giving students tasks, problem-based tasks, project tasks, where they then tell you how I use the Gen AI, what I use the Gen AI for. So whether it's Perplexity AI, Open AI, Deep, Seek, whatever, and so on, I think we want them to be very, very dexterous in overcoming the use of this AI. But at the same time, because of that, we incorporate a lot of lessons pertaining to cybersecurity so that people understand the constraints of AI, number one. The first thing that we emphasize is how do you know what is misinformation, what is disinformation. So accuracy of information, very important. Accuracy of information discernment. A true perspective of understanding that all AI engines, like all newspapers, is biased, right? And it's okay, but we just need to know where are the bias, right? Number three, right, understanding the constraints of AI, and that the human has to be more generative, more creative than the AI, and of course understanding ethical issues coming to it. Of course, you're going to face the problem of, I think generative AI is still not so bad because it is still artificial, right? Because it is really artificial. But I think the worrying trend, which you and I will not know, is what if there is artificial general intelligence? By that I mean artificial intelligence that truly mimic our human moral and decision. I don't know what that will come to, but basically, I think it then goes back to the fact that if we strengthen the factor of what is being human and believe that you can make human thinking good, I think that's the most important thing. So in the whole curriculum, I think the emphasis a lot is now about the thinking. That's why I mentioned about the process of the professional development of the teachers, which is putting a thinking teacher in the classroom. So in some of the curriculum that my center do, we have this model which I advocate, which is what I call higher thinking, HIGHER. So what is my higher thinking? Number one, I think we all know a lot about. I think the curriculum is very heavy on analysis and synthesis. We know how to break things into small parts, put them together, and so on. And GAI can do that even better. But I think GAI can never have the big picture thinking. So the most important thing that we help people learn is what is the bigger picture? How do you think in context? So it represents the H, which I call the helicopter thinking. There's a H. Then the I is a different form of inferential logic. Not just logic, but inferential logic that goes beyond what a computer can do. Because the computer can do all the algorithms. So we need a stronger inferential logic. And then the G, of course, is I think we got to be more generative than the machine, right? And for that, it's very important to have creativity, innovation in the curriculum, right? Yeah. So there's the other G, and H is human-centric. I think human-centric learning is so important. What is it that makes us human, right? And E is for ethics, and the last R is reflection. Machines don't reflect like the way humans reflect, and so in our humanities and sessions and things like we emphasize a lot on the human reflection in the way we live and flourish.
Tammy.
Thank you so much for talking about how you all are investing in early childhood and thinking about bringing the real world to kids. Thinking about the other end of the education spectrums, or the end of secondary, we talk a lot about in the United States and in Colorado, like blurring the lines between bringing high school and our post-secondary systems together and bringing more real-world, hands-on workforce experience to students before they actually leave secondary. So just curious if you could talk a little bit more about what that looks like in Singapore, or if, that's something that you all prioritize as well.
Yeah, so the skill gap and talent gap is something that we talk about and think about daily, because we need a lot of data scientists, and even data scientists, you got to look at different kind of data scientists, because GAI now can also do coding, so it's not just about coding skills per se. So one of the things we incorporate, I think, in relation to the idea of soft skills, is basically the idea of helping a learner to be able to climb steep learning curve, And so now we actually blur the line between pre-service and in-service in the case of teachers, and in many other professions too, which means that actually there is no endpoint to like you already get a certification or accreditation, because the learning happens all the time. And so the idea of getting the population to be very adaptable is very key, right? We have what we call a skills future framework. So that's where the money part comes in. The future framework gave a lot of credits to both the employees and also employers, so that if somebody want to learn something, money is never the problem, right? There will always be this funding for them to learn. So the idea is to give them the personal autonomy and the agency to want to shift. Of course, we do face some problems of, with the current change in your big tech and so on, there will always be retrenchment and things like that. And it's how do we get this middle career people to shift, and that part is not so easy. Actually, for our college graduates, not so much of a problem, because we do have quite a thriving economy, and the universities are very, very responsive to industry. In fact, the higher education funding is such that it's very, very fast. We respond to, like, if we need more computer scientists, more doctors, and so on, it's translated into university places, and allocation to places in the universities is very much linked to skills and the community. Yeah.
Our time is running out. Is there anybody else that wants to? Yes, please go ahead, Erica.
Thank you. I have incredibly enjoyed not only the conversations today, but just you and I's conversations over the last 2 days and learning about all that you do in Singapore. It's incredibly fascinating, and it's something to aspire to from where we sit here, I think, in a lot of ways. My question is, in the conversation earlier that Dr. Reeves and Ms. Williams were sharing around data around boys and men, As you were listening to that conversation and reflecting from your own view from Singapore, it'd be interesting to hear if you would share with us maybe your reflections of that conversation and how those things translate in a Singaporean environment versus the US environment. And what are the comparisons, contrastings between those two that we could understand from your perspective?
Actually, I totally agree with Dr. Reeves that the research shows that when they are from the higher SES, these problems of gender difference is very little. So, I think when they are quite high performing, actually both in the families and in the societal sector, all this issue of whether gender, racial discrimination become a non-issue, right? So, but of course, Singapore is an open society. We do also have a flow of immigrants, and we also have a declining birth rate. We do induct people in, and we do face some of these problems as well. So that is why I think it's where the citizenship education comes in, where we try to emphasize a lot on the respect and build this very much into actual explicit curriculum. Yeah. So in our curriculum we have 3 strategies. Number 1, explicit, because you need the language to talk about things. Number 2, immersing it into the disciplines. So whether in the social science or even in the science education, people talk about values at the same time. And finally, lots and lots of that, the community co-curricular activity, which characterize a lot of the school.
Thank you, Dr. Oon Sang Tan. We appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us.